Hello and welcome everybody to Module 3 of the Stroke Media Advocacy Resource Training, SMART, which is organized by SAFE for other SSOs and for those involved in the implementation of a stroke action plan. I would like to ask all attendees if they haven't, or if they have logged in yet, to put in their first and last name, and if you like, you can use the chat and share the country you are joining from. That would be very nice to see where you are coming from. My name is Markus Wagner, and I'm working for the German Stroke Foundation for many, many years now. And I'm also in very close connection to SAFE for many, many years now. And I always enjoy working with SAFE. So it's an honor for me to be here, the moderator. And I'm also one of the coordinators of a stroke action plan for Europe in my country, in Germany. I also would like to thank, on behalf of SAFE, the sponsors of this webinar series. It's Amgen, Boehringer Ingelheim, Bayer, and BMS Pfizer for their support. So, for the ones who have attended Module 1 and 2 of SMART, they already know the purpose of the training SAFE has conceived. So it's about supporting the advocacy strategy in your country to implement the stroke action plan. And I think this is very, very important. Another aspect is sharing experience. What we will do today is very important. And why is this so important that you have an advocacy strategy? This was covered in the first modules, but I can say from my personal experience, and I've worked on manifestos and declarations for many, many years in Germany and for SAFE especially, it's always sometimes that we neglect a little bit that we need a clear strategy and that we need tools, for instance, to address journalists and media. We learned about this last time, or to address politicians. And this is something which comes in handy if you are a journalist, but on the other hand, if you are a scientist, a medical doctor, or if you work for a stroke support organization, this can be really, really tricky. And so therefore, I think it's a very, very good idea to have this webinar. And looking at the first two modules, I was really impressed about the patient story. Storytelling is always something which is very good, which is also very good in science if you do a presentation. And even if you do a scientific presentation, if you have a story to tell, people will listen to you. And module number 3, I think, has a very interesting title. It's Turning Success into Your Personal Stroke Mission. And we have very good presenters. So we will discuss the evaluation of advocacy activities and progress and communicate success examples of stroke advocacy. And then we will have question and answers in between the different sessions. And we will ask you to put your questions into the chat box. I see Fabrizio. Hi, Fabrizio. Good to see you. Yeah, and after this, I will close the meeting. But before I'll do this, Aline will talk about the next module, and then we will finish. Before starting now, and before I will introduce our speaker, or our first speaker, there are some housekeeping rules. So as you have seen, the session is recorded and will be visible online on a later point. So make sure that your mics are muted and that your camera is off. I think you have all done this. As just mentioned, submit your questions via the chat. For the presenters, you have 20 or 25 minutes time, so take your time, speak slowly, try to speak clearly. If there are any problems, for instance, with your internet connection, like I had, just don't panic. Arlene will help, or the others will help. And yeah, now it's time to turn over to our first speaker. It's Lucia Bárcena. And Lucia is a researcher and campaigner on international trade policy. So she's an absolute expert when it comes to advocacy work. She has worked with international and national networks in developing advocacy plans to influence policy change. And I think that's very, very important to learn from her experience. Previous to this, she worked on an evaluation and monitoring and she's an expert for UN agencies. So she's an expert also for evaluation. And she will give us a talk about how you can evaluate these campaigns. So Lucia, it's up to you now to show how important advocacy work is and also to evaluate this. And I'm looking forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. I'm going to share a screen now. Yes. Yeah. Can you see? Yes, you can see. Okay. So thanks, Marcus. And yeah, indeed, when I first started working as a consultant on evaluation and monitoring projects of development cooperation, I had no idea that I could afterwards use that experience to actually, to introduce that into my own work now as a advocacy and campaigner. And yeah, it's a great, way to incorporate both knowledges. And I hope that after my presentation, you also see the utility and the relevance of, incorporating evaluation in your own work. So, well, first I just, wanted to think out loud with all of you. When you think about evaluation, what words, coming to your mind? And why do I ask this question is because when I used to work as a consultant, every time we got to a project, people would look at us a little bit with a little bit of a fear in their eyes of, oh, now they're going to come and they're going to evaluate and they're going to, tell us the things that we did wrong. And now we're going to have to, go back to the funders, and we don't want them to know that we did things wrong. So sometimes it's actually really hard when you're an evaluator, because you really want to know how the project worked. You don't want to know only the good things. You also want to know what doesn't work, because that's exactly where you can actually learn from. So with this, I want to say that evaluation is not about, only presenting results to the funder, or even to the organizations like director or CEO or whatever, but it's really about you as project managers and as campaigners to learn from the work that you are doing, and to know if what you are doing is going in the right direction, or if you have to, reevaluate and change some of the activities you're doing because they're not reaching any results. But the only way to know that is to have a good baseline, is to know your project and to know where you want to go to, and also to have some kind of indicators in the way that they show you if you are going or not in the right direction. So this is really what evaluation is about. And of course, it really depends, who is asking for the evaluation, or for who do you want to report. If it's for yourself, if it's for your funders, if it's for EU EU institutions, it really depends on who you have to report, because there are different methodologies of how to do this. But what I'm going to show you today is I'm going to try to just get you in the logic of how to look with evaluator eyes. I hope I can achieve that. So yeah, first of all, and I mean, we have afterwards time for questions, but if there's something urgent, maybe you can just write in the chat or stop me, or I'm free for whatever format it's better. Yeah, so first, when we talk about evaluation, and especially about evaluation on social change, which is where we are working, right? We have to know that we are talking about a very complex situation. It's a very complex ecosystem that we're working on. It's social change, so it's people, it's things that happen that are not in our control. So if you imagine, if you're building a bridge, that's something very easy to see, right? You put in the material, you construct the bridge, and at the end you have a bridge. So there's like no doubt there of what the result is and what you have to do to get to that result. But when you are evaluating in social change, the complexity is huge. There are many actors, there are many factors at stake that you have to know. So the better you understand the complexity in which you're working, the easier it's going to be for you to make sure that you try to influence the best in that frame. It's also very unstable in terms of, like, it's not only the duration of your project, but it's beyond the duration of your project. So how do we show that we are causing any change in the long term? Because that's what's interest for us. Sometimes you can do like a course, for example, right? You do a course about how to, or anything. You choose a subject to do a training on, and the people that attend to that training, you would wish that in 2 years, for example, they can use whatever you taught them to do their own advocacy or to write papers or to write any news report. But that's something that's beyond the duration of the training, that goes, in 2 years. So you have to be aware of that and try to measure as much as possible the long-term changes, because it's what's more systemic, right? It's also not linear. And I'm sure that many of you have maybe had experiences with working with logical frameworks, when you have to, you do an activity, and that activity has to take you to a result, and that result is going to create big impact, right? So this linear way of thinking, when we're working on advocacy and policy change and social change, it's very difficult because it's unexpected, and it really sometimes works without any type of logic. So there are ways of planification, but we have to, bear in mind that it's not going to be easy in a linear way. And it's out of control in the sense of, we want to change some policy, but it's not really in our control that that's going to happen. But we do know how we have to influence, or who we have to influence to make that happen. And that's where we're going to focus, in the things that we can influence on. But, it's also to stop worrying so much about the impact, like the huge change. It's really more important sometimes just to talk about the smaller changes that can lead us to that impact, right? So, okay, now I already talked a lot. So yeah, this is just an image. So you imagine, like when a chicken is eating something, and then it puts out an egg, right? So this is like the input. You put a food, and the output is an egg. But what happens in between, we don't know. And that's what's interesting for us to know, because this is what's going to make this happen. And if we don't know this, then we really have no idea if this is going to happen or not, or if this happened because of this or because of something else. So that's really what we want to try to focus on when we do more evaluation in advocacy projects. So quickly, just going to read this out too. The pillars for a good evaluation. What do I mean by this? Before you start an evaluation, you have to incorporate this already in the planning of the project. It doesn't work that you have a project and then at the end you say, oh, so how are we going to evaluate this? No, before you start planning, even before you do the problem analysis, you already have to understand who are the actors that are going to be involved in your project. What do you want those actors to do? Where are they going to be working? Your strategy, like, are you gonna do communication activities? Are you gonna do trainings? Are you gonna do advocacy? All of this you have to know before you set your evaluation framework, because that's what's gonna tell you what you have to look at, what changes have to happen, right? So you have to do your problem analysis, which you already probably do anyway, mapping of actors, complexity analysis. You have to develop your strategy. And for the development of a strategy, you can use many tools, but I always try to choose the theory of change. I don't know if you have worked with that, but theory of change, basically what it tells you is what changes you want to see at the end. So it's not focusing on the impact or the results, but it's telling you, like what kind of behavior has to change at the end of your project. So if you want to influence a politician, that's kind of like, the impact. The impact is there's a policy change. Okay, but what happened for that to happen? The politician has more awareness of the problem. So that's kind of like, what the theory of change is going to tell you. And at the end, you have to develop a monitoring and learning plan. So that's where you have to identify where the information is needed and what kind of information and data you have to collect and manage. So this is, again, the first part of this whole evaluation is, as I said, knowing what you want to change, who is going to help you or who you're going to be working with, and what are you going to do for that to happen. So for that, there's a tool called outcome mapping, which unfortunately we don't have that much time to make practical exercises, but I'm happy to share some guides or some more documents where you can just look at it yourself and try to find ways of doing this. But basically what the outcome mapping says is, okay, so what kind of behaviors do we want to change? So you see, it's always thinking about change. So this image that you see is the classic image of a results chain, okay? So you have the activities that you do, the scope of who you're gonna be working with, and the final impact of who is gonna be benefiting from what you are doing, right? And we call this the sphere of interest, which is the upper sphere, which is the one that you would wish to change, the sphere of influence, which is the one that you actually can change, and the sphere of control, which is what you're gonna, what control you have over the things. So your activities, basically, right? Yeah, so, and here, let me go to the next one. Wait, no. Did I do this? Yeah, I did this like that. Okay, so once you have this is just a framework for you to maybe understand a bit better where you can influence, okay? So the thing about outcome mapping is that when you have the sphere of influence, which is those actors that you're gonna be working with, or the ones that you want to have an influence on, you have to be able to detect them, like to map them. And I don't know if you have done stakeholder mapping exercises in the past modules, probably you have, or in other activities, but this is very important because when you do an advocacy work, you are working in a very complex system, as I said, and it's probably not you alone who is gonna be interested in changing things or who has some kind of influence in politicians. So you have to identify those actors that you're gonna be working with to know what kind of change has to happen in them, okay? So you're not gonna only focus on the beneficiaries at the end of the results chain, but you rather focus on the ones that you can actually impact because they're gonna have some influence, okay? So for example, when I do my work on trade policy, I know that I don't have direct contact with the Ministry of Trade in all the countries because that's very hard contact to have. And it's very hard to influence in a one-to-one meeting because, they're interested in what I have to say, but they're more interested to know who is behind my work. So before going to them, I work with the trade unions because I have more access to the trade unions and because they have influence to the trade ministry. So my work is focused on the trade unions, which is at this level. And I just want to know, what do I want the trade unions to do? So I want the trade unions to incorporate in their agendas trade policies. I want trade unions to understand that trade policy is going to make labor weaker in some issues. And that's what the change I want to happen in the trade unions. And then I expect them to impact or to influence to the trade minister. But that's a bit of the logic, And why is this important? Because then when you have to think about evaluation here, once you understand the context and you know the behaviors that you want to change and who you want to change, then you think about those progress markers. What are progress markers? Progress markers are some kind of indicators, but that are all along the project. So they're not only at the end, like your final result, but they're like all over the project and they're telling you if you're going or not in the right direction. So, you ask yourself, so for example, with the trade unions as well, what do I expect to see? What kind of results I would see immediately after my activity, okay? And you write those down. What would I like to see? So what do I want them to do with those results? So, like I do a training for the trade unions. The results that I will see immediately is that they attend to the training, is that they understand what I'm saying in the training, and that they, take in the knowledge somehow. But what would I like to see is that they actually commit to the results. So I would like them to use my training to write, for example, a press media, or I would like them to use my training to do a statement and to present that statement to the ministry. So that's what I would like to see. And, this is not, we would like, anyway, what I would wish to see, which is like the final level, is a deep transformation. So what I would wish to see is that the trade unions are now considered an actor that can influence the ministry, and they can sit down next to the minister to do trade policy together with them. So, you know, the thing about this is that we don't want only one indicator. We don't want to only know, okay, so I want the trade unions to do this at the end, but I really want to know at all levels what kind of changes have to happen in that specific stakeholder to know that I'm doing the right work. And this is just some examples for you to, yeah, because, you know, if it's already hard enough to sometimes measure things, it's even harder if we don't know how to formulate it well, if we don't know really what we want to see the change happen. So sometimes we write like, what do we want at the end of the project? Oh, we want women to be empowered. But what does that mean? You know, what does an empowered woman mean? Well, we want women to have the will to get involved in our projects. So you're already like adding a little bit of, you know, more detail, more adjectives of what exactly woman, an empowered woman in your project means. Or when we say we want citizens to be sensitized, what does that mean? We want the citizens to change their discourse when they talk about, I don't know, stroke, for example, in your case, or in my case, trade. And that's the things that you can measure. You know, you cannot measure citizens who are sensitized, but you can measure how they have changed the discourse. In the same in government engagement. What does government engagement mean? It means that they're writing new policy content. So if the government is actually passing new laws, or is in the budgets, they're adding things that are interesting for our project, that means that they are actually being engaged with our topics. So the same, you know, to many things. If we say we want a strengthened partnership, what does that mean? We want the network to be able to sustain the implementation of our plan. And I'm finishing now because I know I'm over my time. Yeah, this is just an example, but maybe we can talk about it in the question and answer topic. But I also, you know, because I was wondering, sometimes it's, you know, evaluation can be a little bit abstract. So I just wanted to also show a way of how you can actually evaluate in your own projects. Like you can have a template, and it's very easy to just write down, you know, what kind of activity you did, the number of those activities, for who is that activity, the number of people that attended, for what purpose are you going to deliver this product, with who are you organizing this, and what kind of change is going to happen afterwards. So this was just like a practical tool. But I hope you understand, or you saw that before you do all this, you have to know what you want to change, because if not, it's very difficult. And if you know what you want to change, you can establish like a baseline, which is what was the situation before your project and what is the situation after your project. Yeah, so as an example of this, for example, if you do a training, and again, I go to the training exercise because I think it's something that we do a lot when we do advocacy work, is before the training, you know, you can pass a questionnaire to the people who are assisting and see what they knew before the training. And after the training, you can pass the same questionnaire to see what they know now after the training. And there you can see if the training helped or not to, you know, pass the knowledge that you have. So this is what a baseline is. You know, you compare the situation before to the situation after, but you can adapt that to anything that you're doing. Anyway, so this is just, yeah, like a very basic introduction to how to evaluate, why to evaluate, and yeah, how to incorporate evaluation in your planning and strategy also of projects. And that's it from my side.
Okay, thank you, Lucia, for this very interesting overview of a methodology, I think, which would be very important to have a closer look, because I think you can talk about this for many, many hours. And I think this is something, so we can only see in a nutshell what we need to do if we do evaluation, which is used in a social context, but also if you want to influence policy. So if you have questions in the auditorium, please put it in the chat. May I start with one question which leads a little bit to our targets. So we have, as you might know, also a very complex plan. So the stroke action plan consists of 4 overarching targets, and when we have 7 domains with sub-targets. So can you give us any idea how we could use the mapping in our project, if we call the stroke action plan our project, where to start? Because sometimes I personally don't see the wood for the trees.
That's a question for me, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. So you want to know how to use the stakeholder mapping that you do for?
Yeah. For instance, the stakeholder mapping. If there's a checklist you have in the mapping, or where to start, because I think looking at the stakeholders is very important, because we are looking, for instance, at the health ministers.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there may be a layer down people we have to address. So this is something what I say.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't see all the trees, because there are so many.
Yeah. But my question for you would be, normally when you work, with who do you work? So like if you do advocacy, or if you do a campaign, or if you do, like a signature action or a statement, who are your usual partners with who you try to target or you work with? Or is it only you as a network? I don't know.
Okay. And are there any other tools you are using in your organization you could recommend, or you just say this something we can have a look at?
Yeah. So I mean, the thing is that it really depends on for who you want to report or for who you want to do the evaluation, because if I do a project for the European Commission, the European Commission is going to ask me for very specific things. Like the European Commission usually wants to know the relevance of your action, the efficiency, effectiveness. They want to know the sustainability. So they already put you the frame on what you want to measure. But honestly, for me, that's a really old way of doing evaluation, and it really doesn't work for organizations who do advocacy work. Because as I said at the beginning, for doing advocacy work, you have to understand the complexity, you have to know that so many things can happen, and you have to especially know that it's hard sometimes to attribute the whole results to your own, and sometimes you just contribute to something. So what I usually do when I start a project is all the steps that I showed you. Is I try to understand the situation, and then the most important thing in this type of evaluation is to know the partners with who you're going to be working with. So it's what you asked me before. So the partners who you're going to be working with, or those that you want to influence, and see what kind of change you want to happen in them. So what do I mean? Like, for example, if I do a report, or if you do a report, one thing is to do the report. The other thing is to present the report to the people you want to present the report. But the third and most important thing is how they're going to be using that report. And that's where you have to be looking at when you do evaluation. It's not so much the output, the report on itself, but it's if that report is actually being used, and if it's actually being used to influence on a policy, So that's where you have to know. And the thing is that I cannot tell you now like magical indicators, because they are really dependent on the work that you're going to be doing. But just this logic of thinking what I want to change and who I want the change to be done through somehow. So that's why the stakeholder, yes, it's important, mapping.
Yeah, so let's see if we have questions in the chat. No, for the time being we don't have. So let me ask another question. You talked about success and how do you report success. So for instance, we will hear later if, for instance, the declaration is signed by the health ministry. This is, of course, a big success, and we will learn about the Lithuanian experience. But on the other end, I think there are also smaller steps which are success, and I think it's very important that you continuously report success. It's good for you, but it's also good for other stakeholders, that they see something is moving on. So how do you report success in projects?
Yeah, that was actually my question for you.
Oh, really? Oh,
I wanted to know, for example, the declaration signed by the ministry.
Yeah.
What had to happen for that to happen? So what were the preconditions for that specific thing to happen? And I don't know, like I'm asking you, like if the declaration is signed by the ministry, well, sometimes you're lucky enough that you just talk with the minister and she signs the declaration. Was that your case? Or did you have to do things before that to happen? So, those are the things that show you a bit more of the progress that you're doing. And usually, or at least in my experience with the funders that I have worked with, they're more interested to know the change that happened, but the activities. So they don't really, what I don't report on the activities level. So I don't say, I went to 5 meetings, I did a report, I had this, and then I did that. But I report to them what happened. So I say, the Ministry of Spain, for example, is now against this type of treaties. And that's what they're interested to know. And then they would ask me, so what did you do to contribute to that? And then I explain the whole chain of what I did to do that. But, it's trying to get away or to move a little bit from the activities level, which is easier, and go towards the change or outcome level.
Yeah, I see your point, but I think this is really tricky, because sometimes the only thing you can offer is, well, I've done 3 or 4 activities, and this leads maybe in 1 or 2 years' time to some success you cannot predict for the time being. So I think reporting, and on the other end, not just saying, well, we did something, but nobody's interested in, and you have not no results to show. I think that's a tricky part. And for instance, my organization,
but that's why I was explaining before that the indicators can be at very different level. So they can also be like very immediate results that you can report on. The fact that you do a training and people come, or the fact that you do a training and press media is interested in that topic, that's also something you can report on. So it's not always reporting on the level of the minister signed this letter, but it's also reporting on different levels. And that's why indicators are not only at the end of the project, but throughout the whole thing. And again, this really depends on what you're interested in knowing. So if you're interested in knowing the activities that you do, then you report activities. But like you have to first decide also as an organization, what do we want to focus on? Do we want to focus on change, or do we want to focus on the activities that we do? And you can, it's really like a conversation that you have. There's not like a unique method to evaluate. It has to be adjusted to your needs somehow. Okay, but I'm happy, like, this evaluation, as many other things, you only learn how to do by doing it. It's really hard to think about it sometimes in the abstract, but when you start doing these exercises, and I would have loved to do one example practical with you, you would immediately start changing your glasses to see everything with an evaluator eye.
Yeah, I see your point. So we have one question from the auditorium from the UK. In the UK, we have a framework called social return on investment, which helps us measure success in a way that can generate highlight potential funders.
Sì. Vabbè, ma a voi vi pare tanto strano?
Sì, un po' troppo, però
we have background voice. Could you please mute the mic? Okay, thanks. So it's about return on investment, and if there is something similar on a European framework.
Yeah. Well, there is, if I haven't worked with a specific framework, but I know that I learned about it, which includes a bit more of quantitative data to know investment, how much you kind of invested in the project and the return that you get from that. But at the European level, they usually don't ask for this type of framework, so it's not really used. But I mean, it's useful, yes, but the type of evaluation that I was trying to explain is a bit more qualitative, process oriented. So it would be really interesting to know how to include this into this whole other framework, but yeah, I haven't worked on this, so I cannot tell you how it works.
Yeah.
But if you say there's the same in the European, it's the same. It's called the same social return on investment. You can look it up. There's the OECD guides I can share where you can find the different ways to evaluation. I mean, it's a whole world. No, I didn't have time at the beginning to explain this, but there's impact evaluations, which are already, dedicated to the final impact that you're going to have as a project. There are developmental evaluations, which have to do on the whole process. And there are formative evaluations, which have the focus on the learning aspect of the evaluation. So how can you as an organization learn from your evaluation? So there are like so many different ways to evaluate. And the European Union, the European Commission, is usually only asking on impact evaluation. For the moment, they're interested on the impact. But that doesn't mean that if you don't need to report to such an institution, and you have freedom to do your own evaluation framework and monitoring framework for yourself, then it's so much more interesting to look at these other ways of evaluating, because you can learn, I think, a lot more from the whole process.
Okay. I think we have to move on. Thank you very much for the insight, how complex, but also how rewarding evaluation can be. And thanks again. I think this is something if you see at the links, and if you deal with it, you can learn a lot about it. For me, as a scientist coming from a biological background, I always see there's a lot to learn. So thanks again for this great presentation. And we move on now to Fabrizio. I first would like to introduce Fabrizio. Fabrizio Penacci is the president of Rome's local branch of Alice, the major stroke support organization in Italy. And he's coming from a management background, from a private business consulting practice, has worked there for many, many years. He's very experienced in managing companies. I think that's his main background. But he joined Alice in the year 2019, and he is a former caregiver. So I think it's very interesting to learn from him from a business perspective, but also from a perspective as caregiver, how you can introduce these measures in implementing the stroke action plan. And I've talked to Fabrizio almost 2 years ago, and he told me a lot about his background, and I was really impressed about what Alice is doing, what he is doing. And I think the title of his presentation is also very interesting. It's from short-term achievements to an ongoing success case study from Italy. Fabrizio, it's your floor now. Good to have you in the present here, and I'm looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Marcus. It's good to meet you all. So I thank all the participants to this session. I was asked to share with you some positive experience elements of what we are doing in Italy for the stroke action plan implementation. I prepared a few slides that I'm just about to show. I hope you can see my screen. So just a second. Okay. As Marcus has mentioned, I work for an SSO, Stroke Support Organization. Is a large organization in our country. We have more than 80 local branches, which are coordinated through various levels of federations up to a national level. In 2019, I joined the Rome's branch, and I was immediately requested to collaborate with the president of the Italian Federation to help in building relationship, increasing the visibility of Alice. It was all before I knew about the stroke action plan, but it was all very meaningful to me anyway. So one thing that I can share with you, we wanted to have clear the players and the roles on the field. This was mentioned by Lucia. We have professional and scientific bodies that lead the stroke action plan implementation in Italy, and I think is true in most of the other European countries. Main player is the Italian Stroke Association, previously known as Italian Stroke Organization. Then we have the SIN, so the National Professional Association of Neurology. And then we have many other professional associations that one way or the other, sometimes local, sometimes at national level, participate in the work. They either support us or back us up in meeting some of our needs. Alice, which is the stroke support organization, but is not the only one, is the most important that you can find on the internet. But there's also Fight the Stroke, for example, is an example, is a good example you can check on the internet, is a foundation that is dedicated to support cerebral palsy and pediatric stroke survivors and families. It's very specific target of beneficiaries that they focus on. Still, they are a player that we don't have to forget about. One thing that I want to mention is that recently in our country, the law regarding the activities of the voluntary organizations, of the support organizations have changed and have set some boundaries for us to operate. Some requirements of a fiscal nature, some other requirements of statutory nature, and also we don't have to have medical professionals in our board, and we have to disclose any possible conflict of interest, which is something new that up to last year it wasn't requested, but I think is very healthy because it makes necessary for each association to do some sort of re-evaluation of their composition and their operating model. And then we have clearly the Italian health system, the central authorities. They are divided between central bodies like the Italian Institute of Health, the Ministry of Health, our drug agency for Italy, and others. Then we have something in common with other countries in Europe. We have a delegated structure of our health system in regional components. And we have therefore 21 different health departments at regional levels that will have to make decisions related to the stroke action plan implementation. Not only, we have to speak with hospitals, we have to speak with rehabilitation centers, clinics, we have to speak with the unions or associations of professionals, because we want everybody to be on board. I went slightly long on the previous one. This one is going to fly. Critical success factors are, we had to build a partnership. We started working in collaboration with all these entities, one way or the other, since more than 25 years. In the late 90s, just to make an example, we collaborated as a stroke support organization with the scientific societies in drafting the stroke care guidelines that are in use in Italy and have gotten to their 8th or 9th edition this year. And this is going on. Every time we meet instrumental to the stroke action plan implementation, we tend to meet with all representatives at the table. So we have someone from the scientific society, someone from the stroke support organization, someone from the other players, because everyone has to be on board on the same page. The other critical success factor for us is networking, and this is a no-brainer. More we are connected with other associations or with our other players and partners, the stronger will be our action. But even the outreach, the fact that we communicate out, that we present ourselves, that we show ourselves, is important, because the faces that we put out together with the words make us credible. Last important factor for us, or at least we perceive this as a critical success factor, is the data. Marcus mentioned something before about what indicators can we use to monitor everywhere the progress of our work, considering that we have so many objectives which are divided in sub-objectives, and we have so many entities at regional and country level. Data is fundamental to measure our ability to move from where we start and where we want to get. Unless we are capable of measuring the progress of our work, it's going to be very difficult to be credible, let's say, or compelling in demonstrating the value of what we take forward. So data is a crucial factor. What did we do so far for the SAP-E implementation? The SAP-E program in Italy was launched with the kickoff last year in 2020, right in the middle of the COVID-19 crisis. Very bad timing. Still, this gave us the opportunity to concentrate on some background work that was necessary all the same. So the scientific society and professional bodies concentrated on assessing the situation of stroke care, especially in the acute phase, but not only, across the various regions of Italy. We put to the test our network of regional coordinators, neurologists, professionals that already collaborate with regional authorities, that are in the best position to come up with clear answers on what is interesting for us to know with respect to stroke care. In autumn 2020, so some 10 months ago, a number of questionnaires that we sent out came back, and they were put together to assess the situation of stroke care, to measure a number of indicators. The primary part was the organization of stroke care in each region, the organization of hospitals, and the quality monitoring, and the stroke care process monitoring. But not only, we were looking at the primary prevention programs, at the management of chronicity, and at the telemedicine services and management of the COVID-19 emergency. These two are together because telemedicine was an important element to supply for the reducing level of service in presence due to the fact that the COVID-19 was reducing the opportunities to meet with rehabilitation professionals, for example, to join the structures. In all this, that seems to be all entirely managed by the scientific society, Alice played a central role. I wouldn't say the main role, but personally, I was the one aggregating all the information that was coming from the various surveys from each region, making sense of the information that we were gathering basically on paper and not always in a structured form, to come up with meaningful findings that can be shared with the Neurology Association and with the scientific society. the project outcome was quite interesting, and there was a decision to publish this work, and it's in the process of getting finalized for publication. As a stroke support organization, I'm going to emphasize this point. Alice, we have to say, is entirely staffed with volunteers, so we don't have hired personnel. We only have some external vendors for services which are not central for the advocacy part. So we have someone managing the internet site. We have an accountant for producing the financial statement. But all the rest of our activities, so meeting with the patients, meeting with the associations, participating in the stroke action plan meetings, is all done on a voluntary basis. Our primary function is the advocacy, which I simplified here is to advocate the instances of patients and families. And caregivers, we should not forget the fact that some family members, but not necessarily only family members, can take care of patients, stroke patients. So we have to balance and complement the point of view of the professionals to make a complete picture and give the 360 degrees perspective over the various issues. Also, Alice proved to be a good partner when getting to meet with lawmakers, governing bodies. Why? Because the stroke support organization has some ability to speak a language that is not too technical and is able to make compelling statements and mobilize and even move the attention of politicians towards the objectives of our stroke action plan. We have to leverage that. In particular, we stress always the elements of chronicity. Stroke is not an illness that you can entirely recover from. Some people is fortunate, but more than 30% of patients end up with long-term disability, severe disability. We are stressing the points of life after stroke and of rehabilitation. So where do we start from? The assessment proved that there were some issues with the, let's say, overall situation. In some regions, we had good level of service for certain aspects. In other regions, we were not so good in remaining at the same level. Still, we know now better where to concentrate and what are our priority areas. COVID-19 emergency was one of the big factors influencing the level of service related to stroke care in many situations. We have to remember, I said that before, that the expenditure authority for healthcare is delegated at regional level. So we have 21 independent health systems that we have to put together and make at an even level. Sponsorship will be crucial for that. We are right now working for signing the declaration. It's a unique event, but there's a lot of work before. Lucia was asking what are the preconditions. Well, the main preconditions are you have to raise awareness, you have to have compelling arguments, and especially you have to be so convincing of the necessity of the stroke action plan before getting to sign the declaration. In our country, for example, we don't have just the Ministry of Health. We have at least 3 ministers that we have to put at the same table for signing the declaration. We have a Minister for Disability. We have also a minister that we call for regional affairs, that is basically the coordinator of the various tasks that are taken forward independently at regional level. We met recently with the Ministry of Health and lawmakers to move on this process. And although we are at the beginning of the summer period, in Italy is a big thing, vacation for everyone, we expect to have news soon with respect to our ability to meet at least the Special Secretary of the Minister of Health to arrange for a future meeting. What next? I hope that I'm not going too fast, but there will be room for questions. Once we get consensus over the declaration that we can say it is true, it's a piece of paper, but it entails a level of sponsorship, then we have to take forward the specific actions with each region. And it's not going to be simple because we have to meet with individual players, and the regionalized structure of the scientific society can help in being more present at regional level. We have to discuss a strategy. We have to identify priorities. We have to find the resources to take forward what is necessary. The COVID-19 emergency will probably give us some sort of, let's say, pool of resources that can be used for that, but we have to compete with other priorities at regional level. So it is really important that we will keep very tight on this exercise. As a stroke support organization, we will continue to cooperate with the scientific society and the professional association to reassess with some frequency the current situation of stroke care, because we want to monitor over time how things are going, especially with respect to the objectives that we decide to negotiate with the regions. We have also started a new initiative with the Italian Institute of Health that is called Ictus Care. I'm sorry, it means stroke care, but this is the name they gave it. And it's an initiative that is meant at improving communication between public offices on one side and families and patients on the other side. Here, as a stroke support organization, we believe we have a lot to say. Still, this is a tool set that is going to be used for some sort of self-evaluation, so it's not going to be immediately producing incredible results, but we can include it in the stroke action plan strategies to make it more standard tool for utilization and monitoring even at regional level. And we have to oversee the progress of all the actions that are established at regional level. This is not going to be easy. So we're talking, think the problem of implementing the stroke action plan in a country and multiply it by 21. 21. Yes. Excuse me, do you hear me? I think I finished, so I will give the word back to Marcus if there are any questions for what I presented.
Thank you very much, Fabrizio. So there is time for questions in the chat. In the meantime, if I summarize the amazing work Alice and you and all the other organizations are doing, I think to summarize is that you do very much networking, and that you try to make sure that everybody has its role. For instance, you mentioned that Alice, of course, is working with the patient voice, but you also work very closely with the Italian Stroke Association. And that leads to my question. How do you work together with the media, and how important is the media for you when it comes to the implementation of a stroke action plan?
Okay. Traditionally, I have to admit, I was pretty new of Alice. Traditionally, Alice didn't have a particular strategy with respect to media presence. And even the Italian Stroke Association didn't seem to be quite present. But it's true, the things have to change. The moment that we mobilize the attention of the politicians, we have to keep up momentum. We have to be convincing that what we are doing is for the best interest of the entire Italian community, and belongs to a framework of improvement that has to make changes at European level. Luckily, in our organization, we now have a president recently appointed that seems to be quite familiar with the TV media and social media channels. He is a manager of our national broadcasting company. And we really hope that we can build together a common strategy, a shared strategy. If we don't appear out, if we don't use the media, our message will rapidly get silent and will be forgotten. So we have to be more present.
Yeah, but I think it's always good if you have experienced people on the board as president. I think that's really an asset to have that. So
Yes.
that's great. And another question, because this is something we have on the table in Germany. You mentioned that you have to deal with 3 ministries and with 21 local authorities. So as we also in Germany have the federal system, this is really something very tedious, so to say. So what about the roads? Who is working on the regional authorities? Because Alice is organized regionally, I imagine that the local Alice groups are doing the work in their area. Is that right?
Okay. Although Alice has a local presence, we do not have the capacity to intervene, ask for information, or intervene directly on the processes and on the implementation plans. It's our scientific society, the Italian Stroke Association, that in fact has the better position for doing this work. They have distributed the structure of coordinators that operate at regional level, that will participate to all coordination meetings, and that will report centrally about the progress of the work. Even the progress of issues, even the fact that there are incredible problems ahead, but this is very important for us to keep the eyes on the ground. The fact that we have the scientific society is also giving the necessary earnestness about the information that we gather. We have matters at hand that in the hand of a stroke support organization can be treated too emotionally. We instead have to have the eyes of a professional, and this I appreciate. On the other hand, when it gets to reviewing the numbers, the fact that we have the stroke support organization is, let's say, preventing the bias that is coming from each regional coordinator to be inclined to a positive eye on the situation of his or her own region. So I'm not sure that I responded completely, and I'm not sure if Danilo Toni is still online, but maybe he wanted to add something on this. No, Danilo is not with us anymore, so I think that you have to take my word for this.
Yes.
I see that Francesca Romana is present though, and she is also a member of the Italian Stroke Association. So if she wants to add something, she can do it right now.
Francesca, do you want to add something?
So, hello, can
Hello,
you hear
Francesca.
me?
Yes.
Hi, hi. Sorry, I'm in the hospital right now, so I
Yeah, we see you now too. Hi. But we can't hear you.
hear me?
Now we hear you.
Right, okay. What I wanted to add are some informations about what the Italian Stroke Association is doing in terms of collecting information from the regions. As Fabrizio Pennacchi has presented, sorry, scusate, perché sennò non riesco a parlare. As Fabrizio Pennacchi has said, each region in Italy has its own regional health system, and so there are differences, and is not, the access to services is not homogeneous. For this reason, we are trying to all the clinical path, all the documents from each region, and try to, in order to have a better knowledge of the differences of the and all the activities that are going on at a regional point in the health departments concerning stroke, from primary prevention to life after stroke initiatives. This is what the Italian Stroke Association is doing at the moment. We already survey, we are now going to topics with a second survey. And of course, we are doing everything together with the Alice, so that we can double check and also play with the synergies in the regions. We hope declaration signed soon, but you know that there are also many other topics on the Ministry of Health agenda. So these are the activities so that the Italian Stroke Association is putting on the table at the moment.
Yeah, so I think that's a great strength that you work so closely together. And I know, Francesca, you have worked for Alice too in the past, and you're still very good connected. And I think this is something which is so important, that when it comes to data, that the experts look at the data, and when it comes to media, that you share your stories. So I think it was a great insight into the Italian experience. I think we have to move on. Thanks again, Fabrizio, for this great talk, and Francesca for adding your experience. We have one question from the chat, but I think this is something that can be dealt with via Arlene. It's about how you can finance the translation of the SEPI. So I think Arlene, you will get in direct contact. I think we have now a 5-minute break, and then we move on to our next speaker. So it would be great if you would be back with us at 4:15 Central European time. Okay, everybody? I think we should move on. Our next and last speaker is Professor Dalius Jatusis from Lithuania. Dalius is full-time professor of neurology and director of the Institute of Clinical Medicine and head of the Clinic of Neurology and Neurosurgery at Vilnius University, Lithuania. He is a dedicated researcher, and his research interest is cerebrovascular disease. It's even in German a difficult word, cerebrovaskuläre Erkrankung. So, okay, stroke prevention and acute stroke treatment, and also cerebrovascular ultrasound. He's president of the Lithuanian Stroke Association, a fellow of the European Stroke Organization, and also the national coordinator for implementation of the Stroke Action Plan for Europe, and principal investigator of a lot of clinical trials. So, Dalius, you are an expert in neurology, and now we will see how you and your team managed in Lithuania to get the declaration of the SEPI signed. And I really like the title of your presentation. It's learning for yourself by learning from others, case study from Eastern Europe. We are looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you for kind introduction, and hello everyone in this meeting. I will try to share my screen. So this presentation was prepared together with Alexander Svilionskis, who is also participating in this meeting. He is also a member of Lithuanian Stroke Association. And I would like to share our Lithuanian experience from the professional's viewpoint, from the doctor's viewpoint, because we also have some success story, but probably with a little bit different background. So our story, I will start from the last point of this story. As we know, we have a stroke action plan for Europe, and we had initiative to translate the text of this declaration into native languages, to discuss, to announce to the authorities, and to get governmental approval, support in order to implement this declaration into real clinical life. So after discussions in groups of European countries, we started our actions. And in Lithuania, we started from the translation of declaration into our native Lithuanian language, so you can chance to see how it looks like. And then after the draft translation, we presented this text version and discussed with our Lithuanian Stroke Association members during the conference. We have annual stroke conference every year, and this year we had it on April 30, 2021. So it was very good time, just almost 2 weeks before May 11th. So it was attended by 500 remote participants and reported in media. Probably it also helped us a little bit because reports in the media probably were heard by authorities from parliament, from health ministry. And the final point of this story was that we offered the translation to our chief of Health Affairs Committee of the Parliament of Republic of Lithuania. And this declaration was signed by Mr. Antanas Matulas, who is the chairman. So that's why we received approval from the government, from the Parliament of Lithuania. So, of course, we are very happy about that. What is interesting, we didn't meet Mr. Matulas personally this time because of busy agenda and tense pandemic situation, but he signed trusting the opinion of experts of Lithuanian Stroke Association that is really necessary and beneficial for our patients. But after that, of course, we didn't stop with the signatures, and we organized press release on declaration and Lithuania's support for this initiative. We published through several media channels. Declaration and some tasks of this declaration were quoted at our quarterly meeting of Lithuanian Stroke Monitoring or Steering Committee. 2 weeks later, this meeting was attended by representatives of all Lithuanian stroke centers, professionals, members of a stroke monitoring committee, representatives of Ministry of Health and State Health Insurance Foundation. Of course, in order to implement the tasks and ideas of declaration into real clinical practice, it's necessary to somehow to implement international standards. So right now we are working on the national standards for stroke treatment and care, and Alexander and me and a few other members of Lithuanian Stroke Association taking part into preparation of text and in taking part in discussions. And we hope that main tasks of SAP will be incorporated into the text of national standard. A direct contact meeting with the authorities from Health Ministry and Parliament Health Affairs Committee is planned for the fall of 2021, after hopefully the end of pandemic situation and so on. Several channels of media were really important, and we published the announcement about Lithuania's support in the websites of our hospitals. This is website of my hospital. This is website of Alexandra's hospital, and we have a Facebook account of Lithuanian Stroke Association, pretty well attended by patients as well. So I hope that majority of our media persons and as well professionals and probably patients, we hope, already know about this initiative, declaration, and Lithuania's support. So that's nice, but I would like to continue with what lies behind the origins of this story. What's behind this beautiful wallpaper? So let's have a glimpse into the organization of stroke care in Lithuania and some brief history of the development of stroke care system in Lithuania. We are a small country. We are poor in football, but we are very good in basketball. Nevertheless, we have almost 3 million inhabitants. And what is not so nice to say, we have pretty high incidence of stroke, mainly due to inadequate control of vascular risk factors. We started modern reperfusion therapies of stroke, of acute ischemic stroke, like intravenous thrombolysis, mechanical thrombectomy. In 20 years ago, the first intra-arterial thrombolysis was performed in 1997, IVT 2002, first mechanical thrombectomy in 2012. But what could you see from this slide? Until 2014, the numbers of these modern therapies were very low. And all these attempts to increase somehow the percentage of strokes treated with modern methods were not so successful. And everything was based on enthusiastic doctors, but not on the system per se. So the real breakthrough to increase somehow the modern therapies, modern stroke care in general, was in 2014. So first step was the proclamation of stroke as one of 5 healthcare priorities in 2013, together with oncological diseases, heart diseases, traumas, tuberculosis, and infection diseases. So after the stroke as a priority proclamation in 2014, the Ministry of Health issued very important documents about the acute stroke diagnostics and treatment, methods inventory. They issued in these orders definition and establishment of comprehensive stroke centers and intermediate hospitals. And the task and idea of these documents were to make reperfusion therapy and overall acute stroke therapy available to each eligible patient in Lithuania, not only in big cities, in capital or Kaunas, Klaipėda, second and third cities, but for all Lithuanian inhabitants and patients. At the same time, the Stroke Steering or Stroke Monitoring Committee also was initiated, And we as specialists also are members of this stroke steering committee, and the head of the stroke steering committee is our colleague, Professor Daiva Rastenytė from Kaunas Medical University. So this is the scheme of our stroke centers and intermediate hospitals, comprehensive stroke centers where thrombolytic therapy and thrombectomy are available every day, 24 hours. These are red spots, and green spots are intermediate hospitals with the availability of IVT. However, thrombectomy is not available in green intermediate hospitals, and the patient should be transferred to the comprehensive stroke center for thrombectomy if it's necessary. At the same time, non-financial incentives promoting the discussion at all levels with head of hospitals, ambulance services, specialists from health ministry and so on were taking place at the same time. And also patients also were involved into this process of discussions. The opinion of patients was really important as well. Despite the fact, sad fact probably, we do not have very active stroke survivor organization, SSO, in Lithuania. And we use the experience of single, well-known for society patients. I will show you later on. So, stroke integrated here steering or monitoring committee have regular meetings every 3 months with monitoring of key performance indicators, with monitoring activities of each center of intermediate hospital. What's important in these meetings, always we have representative of Ministry of Health. Here in this slide, you can see myself and my colleague Daiva Rastenytė, who is the chief of ministry, together with together with ministry. So this is our principal scheme, how we rearranged quite dramatically this scheme in Lithuania. So now patients with acute stroke should be treated only in stroke center or in intermediate hospital, but not in district hospital, at least for the primary diagnosis and the acute stage of stroke. Later on, of course, family physicians, outpatient primary care centers, rehab institutions are extremely important. But this logistics scheme of our stroke care system was implemented with some problems, of course, but somehow we managed that with help of government, of course. Key performance indicators, which should be and are monitoring by our steering committee, are listed here, but I'm not going into the details. What's important from the practical point? Starting from 2014, you can observe in these slides quite sharp increase of IVT thrombolytic therapies. These are percentages of acute stroke patients treated in stroke centers since 2014 until 2019. Extremely dramatical increase of mechanical thrombectomies in almost all comprehensive stroke centers. And we already have data from 2020. Here I didn't represent data from 2020 because we had, as all of us, had problems with COVID pandemic situation. We had decrease of stroke cases treated in the hospital. Nevertheless, we retained actually the same numbers of IVT and thrombectomies despite the pandemic challenges for us. So the numbers are more or less the same, and the data from 2020 showed us that almost 15 or even a little bit more acute ischemic stroke cases were treated in Lithuania by means of IVT or mechanical thrombectomies. At the same time, we observed a quite important and sharp decrease of door-to-needle time, one of quality key indicators. Also, we had a decrease of mortality and so on. What's important, in addition to orders of health ministry and support of government, education, of course, education and implementation of international standards. So our stroke association is pretty active in this area, and we regularly update our Lithuanian stroke algorithm or recommendations. So the newest version 2021 was printed very recently, but internet online version is available already since the last year. Also at the same time, we're trying to participate in many international stroke registries and international collaborative initiatives like Rescue, SITS, Angels Initiative, and so on. And also we participate in many international clinical trials. That's why we can say that nowadays acute stroke is treated in Lithuania more or less in the same way like in all European countries. Of course, we have challenges how to improve our prevention of stroke, but this is another story. What's very important in addition to professionals, this is educational activities with stroke nurses, with paramedics, with emergency doctors, and we regularly have meetings, educational seminars, workshops with nurses. We hope that these initiatives are really important for improvement of quality of stroke service. The next aspect of our success, probably the World Stroke Day events and announcements about stroke in social media. We have a website, we have a Facebook accounts, we have annual events dedicated to World Stroke Day. So you can see translated cartoons of Angels Initiative into our Lithuanian language. You can see announcements in our websites. As I mentioned before, it's very important to have active patients organization because we have a really good relationships with authorities, but they are always asking about the opinion of patients. And in these areas where we have really good patient organizations, for example, epilepsy organization of patients, multiple sclerosis, diabetes. So these societies of patients are really active and promoting the modern care medications and so on. So we lacking the similar organization. We tried to use personal experiences of well-known patients in society. And just one of examples, one of our very famous musicians, chief conductor and art director of Vilnius Chamber Orchestra, Donatas Katkus, suffered from stroke. He recovered very well. And we use in our media his personal insights, suggestions. We had a press conference together with him. And this voice of very well-known for society patient was really important in order to increase awareness of stroke. And probably it also helped a little bit, at least, to get political support for beneficial stroke activities in our country. So coming to the end, main challenges and future steps for us. We expect better secondary stroke prevention in order to decrease incidence of stroke. We'd like to establish PIA clinics, at least by comprehensive stroke centers. We need better stroke patient follow-up, further improvement and optimization of stroke care network, wider application of artificial intelligence in stroke imaging, quality assurance of instruments on a national scale, stroke nurse training. We already had several meetings for education of nurses in the field of stroke, but also the new program in our medical faculty of Vilnius University starting since September this year. And the task and the study program will be specialized stroke nurse training. So we expect to have stroke nurse specialists in 2 years after education. Of course, sustainability of funding, but what is one of main tasks for the nearest future establishment of an active patient organization. So political support has been already obtained. However, the successful implementation of stroke action plan requires action by the executive. That means Ministry of Health. And we hope to have direct contacts and meetings with the representatives of Ministry of Health in this fall. So integrated efforts of everyone, leading stroke specialists, government, a well-balanced stroke care network, and active patients are essential for the breakthrough in stroke care in every country, I would say, not only in our country. Thank you for attention.
Well, Darius, thank you very much for this very impressive presentation. And I also love to hear your conclusion that working together with the patient and having an integrated system is important for Lithuania, but also for other countries. I agree 100%. I think this is very important. I have one question, and maybe this is something you can discuss with Arlene, because you mentioned it many times that having a stronger stroke support organization would be great to have, not only when it comes to media, but also when it comes to the organization, for instance, of services after stroke. So maybe you can get in contact with Arlene, or you're already in contact, how SAFE can support. And I think this is very important. That's just a personal comment, I would say. But that leads me to a question. If I understand it right, your starting point for building up the whole stroke system, primarily in the acute phase, was somewhere around 2010, 2013. You showed the slides that you had stroke units implemented, and then that the rates of thrombolysis went up, and nowadays you're also focusing on thrombectomy. I think that's something that happens in many countries. Would you say that the acute treatment, which is done by you and your colleagues, is the flagstone or the cornerstone and the flagship for building up a stroke system? Because the policy looks at the acute phase, and there is a lot of things that can be done. Is this also your perception? Because I've seen this in many European countries, that you start with the acute phase, and we in Germany do this the same, and then you talk with the politicians also about rehabilitation, about secondary prevention, and life after stroke, in that order.
Yes, you're correct. We started our breakthrough in 2014, and we started really from the building of acute stroke treatment system, rebuilding the old system into the modern way, concentrating patients in stroke centers, in intermediate hospitals. But I completely agree and see the point that the acute reperfusional therapy is not enough. This is just, for 15% of patients in acute phase, but we have 80 or 85% of patients who should be treated by basic therapy means, and this therapy is also very effective. And also we need the best prevention in order to decrease incidence, because the reperfusion doesn't decrease incidence. So we started from the acute phase. Probably this is the easiest way to show the importance of stroke, to show the numbers of IVT, the numbers of reperfusional therapies. It's very nice to show to politicians that you see how the numbers are going up. But in order to improve the quality of life of stroke survivors, in order to decrease incidence, it's necessary to talk in more wider in a viewpoint. And what we are doing right now, we're talking about TIA clinics, we're talking about improvement of prevention, we're talking about improvement of rehabilitation institutions. It's not bad in our country, but anyway, it might be better. And we're talking about social support for survivors. Because it's probably it's more difficult to show in near numbers during a year or two, but you know, politicians sometimes they are living from one election to another, and they would like to see immediate effect of actions or resources. But we're trying to convince them that the long-term benefits, improving rehabilitation and social life of survivors is very important, maybe even more important than acute therapy for selected patients.
Well, if I may, yeah, you see, I have to find my words, because I think it's so important to hear this from you. This is a process we have in Germany for many, many years. We focused on the acute phase. That was very important for the first years when I started in the Stroke Foundation. But on the other hand, as you just mentioned, life after stroke, and also when it comes to evaluation, it's the quality of life. And this is something that's so important for the stroke patients. And I think this is something SAFE is striving for many, many years. And so therefore, it's so good to have experts like you in the countries who see at the whole chain of care for the stroke patients. Of course, you need the success stories of your acute phase, but on the other hand, then you have to network, you have to build up a rehabilitation system. And then, as you mentioned, also the follow-up system for the stroke survivors and for their relatives, that they don't fall into a so-called black hole and nobody is taking care for it. And this is the process we are discussing all the time being in Germany with the experts. And I'm very thankful that they have picked up the topic and that we're working on it. So it's great to hear that you are doing this and that you have this in your scope. And I think this is what we really need. So it becomes very personal for me, because this is what I'm working on for many, many years now. And it's great to see that so many people are on the way to building up this in the country. So before I talk too much now, are there any questions? I just see some comments from Nenad or from Sarah Belson. Thank you for this powerful message and the great presentation. So you see that many, many people agree, and there again, it's so important that dedicated doctors, neurologists work together with stroke support organizations. So this could also work as a final statement, because I've done my words, and you see that this topic is really, really important. It won't be the last time we are talking about this. If there are no other questions, I would finish this section. But on the other hand, Dalius, if you have some final message for us, it would be great too.
I think the final message is let's work together. We are looking forward very much into the implementation of SAPE, Stroke Action Plan, because for us it's much easier would be convince our authorities, because this is document for all Europe, and we should do the same way. We should keep the standards of European countries, and for us it would be great help for convincing. I hope for everyone.
Yeah, that's great, because that could have been one of my questions, if a stroke action plan is helpful for you, and you just mentioned that, and I think that's great, and it's a very good example you're giving. And as I'm working also as a national coordinator, I can learn a lot from you and your talk, and this gives me even more power to work on this now, because in Germany the situation for the time being, it's the COVID pandemic, it's the election coming up, and it's very difficult to reach politicians for the time being. But in autumn we will have a new government, and then we'll make a fresh start with policy. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So thanks again for all the presenters for their great talks, and now we have I think a good insight, new ways how to think about evaluation, and also 2 very good examples from the south of Europe and from the northeast of Europe. And I think that's very important, that we collect these examples, that we learn from each other. And now I hand over to Aline, because she has plans for the future for the next modules. Aline, it's your turn.
Hi, thanks Marcus. Hi everybody. I'm going to talk for a couple of minutes. You haven't heard from me over the last 3 sessions. I thought I would pop in and just say thank you to, I know Marcus is going to say thank you again, but thank you to all the speakers over the last 3 modules. Thank you to everybody that's participated and come back again to the 3 modules. I think we've learned a lot from each other, and as Marcus and Dalia says, the more we can do to share our successes, the more we'll be able to help each other in this really challenging implementation of the stroke action plan. I think we've heard that collaboration and stakeholder mapping is absolutely essential. Getting the patients involved, medics involved, policymakers, media involved is absolutely crucial. We've heard a lot about how to create strategies and how that's so important. Today I was thinking planning. That seems to be a really key thing. Plan out what you want to do and what you want to achieve, and then that really will help you measure. But what I wanted to say was, after these meetings, we will follow up with you and we will send you the recordings. So if you wanted to watch them again, you can see the recordings. We will send you the presentations. We also want to send you some maybe hints and tips or template documents, which might also help you with your work as well. So we can condense the 3 sessions into maybe some hints and tips or template documents. So please do drop me an email if there's anything you think could be useful to you. In addition, just finally, before I hand back to Marcus, we would really like to help you. So if over the summer, some of you wanted to speak to myself, Marcus and Laura and others, if you want to share your strategies with us, maybe your policy strategies, your advocacy strategies, or your communication strategies, we'd be really happy to help you if you wanted to share that with us. We'd be delighted if you all got in touch and we were overwhelmed with it. We would really like to help you. So if there's anything that you would like to share with me by email, I'd really be happy to talk to you on a Zoom call in the future over the summer and help you with your plans. And then what we'd like to do after the summer, so kind of setting you some homework. If you want to do some strategies, some planning, using some of the materials that you have learned over the 3 sessions, we'd love to help you. Then in the summer, we will come back in September. We have another meeting in September, and we might have some more presentations from some other organisations that have done well in their stroke action plan for Europe work, in terms of maybe the declaration signing, or maybe someone might want to present their communication strategy or their advocacy strategy, because that again might be helpful to people. So what I'm saying is we're here to help. We'd really like to help you, and we'd really like to share your experiences with more people on calls like this as we move into 2021. As Marcus and everybody has said today, COVID has been a real focus. COVID will continue to be a focus. But what we do know is that our health systems need to do better to protect our stroke patients and our stroke survivors as we move forward. And advocacy and the Stroke Action Plan is a key thing to make this happen in your country. So with that said, Marcus, I'll hand back over to you to close. And again, like I said, if anybody, please get in touch. I will get in touch with you to see if you need any help from us as well.
Thank you, Arlene. I really enjoyed being the moderator of this meeting. There is one question of Dorina about the same question I raised. Is it from a tactical point good if you have an election in your country to do the work afterwards? I mentioned what Germany is doing, but on the other hand, this would be maybe a good starting point to get into contact with you, Arlene, and we can work on this. On the other hand, of course, I think I've made my statement. I've made my summary. I would like to thank all the speakers. I think that was great, Lucia, Fabrizio, and Dalius. But I also would like to thank Laura and Arlene for preparing this. This has been tremendous work, very well done. I'm really impressed. Everything is prepared and rehearsed, and we are all a little bit, or I've seen that you are nervous. What is the moderator doing? Will he do what we want him to do? I did my best to stick to it, and I think that's very great. I personally would appreciate if at some point in this year or next year we could see each other, because I'm not an expert with Zoom, and you've seen my internet connection was a little bit rough sometimes. It makes me a little bit nervous. But before I talk too much, it was wonderful to be in the session, and I wish you a very good summer, and wish us all that we can go with good power through the summer and see each other soon. I would like to thank the sponsors again. I think that's very important that SAFE has this support, and say goodbye to you all.